A new cancer cluster appears to be emerging with believed ties to toxin exposure from Ground Zero. The victims in this instance, high school and college students who returned to their classrooms just weeks after the 9/11 attacks. Today was the first time that Alex and Michelle had met. Their studies and their careers have taken them in different directions, but their stories are closely intertwined. Both returned to their schools blocks away from Ground Zero in the weeks after 9/11, and they've both been forced to confront a life-changing diagnosis that neither expected.
Well, if you do, then you get Michael involved and you appeal it.
So I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer when I was 28 years old. I had just moved out to California for grad school, and I was devastated by my diagnosis. It was completely unexpected. I was blindsided by it. It was just a significant time in my life. I was away from my family, my friends, my whole support network, which turns out to be really important when somebody's going through cancer.
I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer when I was 25, and it was also through just a routine checkup where the doctor happened to feel my neck, to feel my lymph nodes, and it was completely unexpected. And being a young person, when all your friends are out living their lives and starting their careers and dating, it's really, really hard to be dealing with something so sudden and sort of confronting your mortality when you're at such a young age.
Alex was a senior at Pace University when the towers fell and was initially unaware that there could be a connection between her cancer diagnosis and the toxins she was exposed to. For Michelle, though, the connection was immediate. A number of her classmates at Stuyvesant High School have also been diagnosed with severe cancers in their 20s. Rich Allies works for the law firm assisting Michelle and Alex. He's a 40-year veteran of the New York City Fire Department and served as a battalion chief during 9/11. He recalls the conditions around Ground Zero.
In the early days we worked, there was just a cloud of haze, sort of like a snowstorm. You know, just the air, it was very difficult to breathe. We didn't have proper breathing apparatus, so everyone was using paper masks, which would just clog up and you'd get rid of it.
I can hear you! I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
As a first responder, I knew the risk that we were taking, dealing with the toxic exposure, but that was something that I had signed on for. And the weeks following, it was just, you just realized, it was a vivid smell. You knew that the air was not safe to breathe.
Stuyvesant High School was used as a command centre for recovery workers in the days following 9/11. And after the EPA declared that the air was safe to breathe and the water was safe to drink, the school reopened to students less than a month later.
I definitely remember the smell, sort of an acrid chemical smell that was all throughout Lower Manhattan. Walking from the subway to high school, I remember thinking, this smells like the kind of thing we should absolutely not be breathing in. And we just did day after day. There was a barge right next to our school where they were dumping debris from the World Trade Center. And to me, that's one of the most visceral memories, is the sound of mangled metal from a building where we had watched people die being dumped into a barge, and it would kick up all this dust and we would hear the sound, and we would have to think every single time, of the fact that we'd seen this building fall, and now right by our high school they were putting giant mangled pieces of it into a barge. It was a terrible situation.
Michelle's lawyer highlights the fact that she was a minor at the time with no decision-making ability of her own.
They didn't have a choice. As a matter of fact, they were told the air is safe. Those were the famous words of the Environmental Protection Agency, whose leader forgot her mission, which is protection. It's the middle word there.
We've had concern. We're going to continue to monitor, but right now, as I will tell you, everything we're getting back from the sampling that we're doing is below background levels. There is not a reason for the general public to be concerned. It's not going to be a particular hazard unless you have breathing difficulties.
And instead, they said the exact opposite. Come back to school. Come back to Wall Street. Everything is okay. Unfortunately, they really let the public down.
Michael was influential in the passing of the Zadroga Act. That's legislation that established the World Trade Center Health Program, covering the cost of medical care for those who were exposed to toxic fumes, dust and smoke, and later became sick. For Michelle and Alex, that's included a very specific type of treatment in order to destroy the cancer cells.
I had radioactive iodine treatment, which is a very unusual treatment that people with thyroid cancer have, and unlike with radiation or chemotherapy, radioactive iodine treatment actually makes you radioactive and you have to be quarantined. And it is not only physically very frightening to sign a piece of paper saying, I allow this doctor to purposely contaminate me and make me radioactive, but psychologically the toll that quarantine takes on you is quite severe.
The isolation piece, when you take the radioactive iodine, that was devastating, to say the least. I mean, you can't interact with human beings. You have to be by yourself, take care of all your needs by yourself, and you know, you can't even be around your loved ones who are there to support you. So that was terrible. I mean, it definitely led to absolutely a depressive episode.
Medical experts are confident that these cancers can be directly tied to toxin exposure, and that the problem is only likely to increase in severity in the years ahead.
I think we do feel pretty definitively that this is a cancer cluster related to the 9/11 toxin exposures, but I think this is just the beginning of the cancers we're likely to see, because there is a very long lag time between when you're exposed to a carcinogen, you know, toxins that could cause cancer, and when you actually develop the cancer. And 10 years in terms of that kind of biology is not very long. So I would expect in the next 10 years or so that we'll actually see a lot more cancers related to the event.
Dr. Gounder also addresses the psychological impact a cancer diagnosis can have at such a young age.
Especially for two young women being diagnosed with cancer, you're having to think about, gosh, will I even have kids of my own, and what are the implications in terms of their risk of having cancer? You know, so I think it is a bit of a different thing when somebody that young is diagnosed with cancer before really having had a chance to start a life, a family, a career. It is a very different point of your life to be coping with something like that.
Following radioactive treatment, both Michelle and Alex are now in remission. Their experiences have had a significant impact on their career paths. Alex now oversees research at UCLA investigating the links between breast cancer diagnosis and depression, while Michelle has just written a book exploring the ways in which young women navigate serious health issues.
That is good.
Both of you pursued careers in journalism and the medical field, respectively looking at psychology, the psychology of diagnosis. So I wonder, what impact has your own personal diagnosis had on your personal mental health?
Cancer is pretty terrible at any age, but we were both in our early 20s or mid-20s, and you can't get that youth back, you know? It's an age where you've been promised sort of ease, and that it would get harder as you got older, and we kind of both got hit with something much sooner than a lot of other people, and you can't get that back, unfortunately.
I mean, it definitely changes your life trajectory. It, you know, made me question, you know, my future, my fertility, what cancer treatments would do to my body at such a young age. I'm also taking medication, you know, thyroid medication for life, and a young person shouldn't have to take medication for life. A young person shouldn't have to deal with cancer in their late 20s, but you do, and you move on and you just deal with it. But it's changed my life completely.
For Alex, a ray of light at the end of a difficult, dark tunnel. Last year, 9 years after her cancer diagnosis, she and her husband Colin gave birth to their first child, a daughter, Jasmine Rose Miller. Spending time with Michelle and Alex, it became very apparent that this isn't a matter of blame. It was incredibly difficult to recall those days following 9/11, but for them it's important. Important to raise awareness and ensure that other students who may have been exposed to toxins remain vigilant and are screened regularly by their physicians.